I don't know if you've noticed, but nuclear has been going through this cultural renaissance. And many people now view nuclear as this unfairly villainized technology that actually holds the key to solving our climate change problems. So is that true? Or is it all hype? Well, to answer that question, we first have to explore how nuclear works, why it's failed in the past, why this renewed attention is coming about, and what its future looks like considering all of these new developments. And we're gonna do all of that in 10 minutes or less, because you're probably a busy person and I can't be bothered to edit a video that's longer than 10 minutes. But, as you can expect, covering anything in 10 minutes means we're going to have to stick to the essentials. So anything that I've removed for time, you can see in these boxes that I'll put on the side here, so pause if you want to read those. This video, by the way, is the third video in my 10 minutes or less series where I explain everything you need to know about different climate change solutions. I do, however, expect it to be the most controversial one, even though my wind turbine video had some pretty interesting takes. You can watch that video, by the way, by clicking up here. Better yet, if you want more quick, fact-based summaries, make sure to subscribe. But with all that said, my name is Matthew. I got these 2 degrees faster than it took the US to build just 2 nuclear reactors. I'm not lying, by the way, you can look it up. And you are watching Carbon Anonymous. Alright, so nuclear quite literally exploded onto the scene in the 1940s, and what immediately separated it from other energy sources was just how much energy it could release. Normal combustion, like burning coal, generates energy by breaking chemical bonds between atoms. Nuclear fission is different. It releases energy by breaking apart the very atoms itself, which, as it turns out, creates a heck of a lot more energy. And depending on the purpose, you can release all of that energy at once, like in a nuclear bomb, or you can release it slowly over time and capture that energy to generate steam, which in turn spins a turbine to generate electricity. Yup, we essentially harness the power of the sun just to essentially boil water. However, by doing all of that, you can generate huge amounts of carbon-free electricity, which is perfect for the climate. Better yet, unlike other energy sources like wind and solar, it's not intermittent. It doesn't rely on the wind and it doesn't rely on the sun. It just simply works. So clearly there is a case that nuclear could solve our climate change problems while also delivering our energy needs. So why is it so controversial? Although it's hard to imagine now, nuclear energy in the 1950s had some real optimism behind it. And the atomic age was envisioned as this technocratic utopia where electricity would be, quote, too cheap to meter and would bring about huge advancements in things like healthcare, food, and transportation. Obviously, some of those more far-fetched advancements were a pipe dream, but even then, the more moderate claims like cheap electricity quickly hit some pretty hard reality checks. And what was an impressive nuclear boom, pardon my pun, only took 20 years to turn into an equally impressive nuclear bust. What killed nuclear is almost as contentious as the technology itself, so I'm quickly going to summarize the plethora of arguments that are laid at the tombstone of what was supposed to be the atomic age. Well, it turns out it wasn't actually that cheap, and when in competition against alternatives, it struggled to compete. Cost overruns were very frequent. In fact, they averaged at 207% for first generation US reactors. Even slight construction delays just ballooned financing costs, which made it even more expensive. Electricity demand did not increase as expected, which just meant that we needed less reactors overall. Many environmental organizations emerged in the 1970s that were firmly anti-nuclear, which created many headaches for the industry. Lastly, the highly publicized 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl disasters worsened public perception and only solidified support for more stringent and costly regulation. Now, you can choose to believe or not believe any of those arguments, but at the end of the day, a combination of them did kill nuclear for quite some time. And although it has rebounded somewhat, it really never has returned to that golden era. So I guess the question is whether that's going to change now that we're getting this renewed attention. Although there is probably a lot of reasons, I think there's three broad trends that are driving this supposed revival. Many countries are trying to reduce their fossil fuel usage for some pretty obvious climate change reasons, but they're doing it for security as well. You only need to look to Europe to see how problematic it is to be dependent on imported fossil energy, especially when it's coming from a political rival. This, by the way, is called energy security and is a huge strategic driver for nuclear, and is the reason why countries like France and China have continued to invest in nuclear so heavily. Political support for nuclear has become very commonplace in a lot of movements, especially on the right, where it is pitched as this, quote, pragmatic alternative to voters who dislike renewable energy. This has helped establish some much needed support for things like subsidies and deregulation. New technological advancements, especially in small modular reactors or SMRs, hold the potential to solve many of nuclear's previously mentioned problems. Their smaller size opens up more applications, hopefully making them less risky, and their modularity could also really speed up construction times and reduce costs. Together, these trends are really helping nuclear get back on its feet. However, I really think we should temper expectations here because we are at risk of falling for the same overzealous optimism of the 1950s and 60s. While nuclear is projected to grow, in fact, many countries have pledged to triple their nuclear capacity by 2050, this is also projected to be largely overshadowed by some massive growth in renewable energy. So why is that? Well, first things first, as a technology, it is simply slow. As you can imagine, there is a heck of a lot more planning, permitting, designing, and construction involved with nuclear reactors than just plopping solar panels on a roof or field. So in that sense, the numbers are always going to look smaller in comparison. Secondly, as an investment, they are still pretty risky, and that is scaring a lot of investors away. Right? Single plants cost billions to tens of billions of dollars, and even slight problems can really impact their economics. So when we look at countries that have succeeded integrating large amounts of nuclear energy, they did so by having consistent, long-term, and well-executed nuclear strategies, which helped reduce that risk, so investors felt confident that they weren't just throwing their money into a dark pit. Drastic swings in energy policy make nuclear a nightmare investment. The US, I am looking at you here. Lastly, nuclear does not exist in a vacuum, and how it compares to other energy sources is more important than anything else. And while it is certainly true that nuclear has been getting better and safer, so has every other technology. Advancements in natural gas, wind, and solar have reduced their costs much below to what nuclear can currently provide. And even if SMRs revolutionize nuclear energy, which right now is a big if, we still have to assess whether that's sufficient to close the gap. All of this is not to say that nuclear is useless. It is still a very important tool in our climate change toolbox. It is safe, it is non-intermittent, and very energy dense, which for regions that need that, it's a great solution. What I am trying to get across here is that nuclear is neither useless or a silver bullet. It is in fact somewhere in the middle, as with most climate change solutions. And instead of bickering over what the best solution is, we should instead be trying to orient the conversation about which solution is best for each circumstance. Well, there you go. Everything you need to know about nuclear in 10 minutes or less. I hope I did a good job of showing the pros and cons. So if you've liked this video, leave a like, make sure to subscribe because that helps me a lot. Also leave a comment if you have your own opinion on nuclear. But with that said, my name is Matthew, you've been watching Carbon Anonymous, and thank you for stopping by.